Next up, we have Lee Tittle, Program Manager for the Strategic Initiatives and Business Intelligence Division. Lee is the Program Manager for the new Services MAC vehicle some of you may have heard about. Lee is going to provide us information about this new strategic contract vehicle that GSA is working on. Lee, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon. I was just looking at my watch. I may have some little ones coming to the front door, getting home from school, so that it's the new normal. So forgive me if I have to step away for like three or 4 seconds. Jocelyn, it sounds like you set the table for me, so I appreciate that. Excited to be here today to talk a little bit about what we're currently calling this new project, Services MAC. And before I begin, that may not be the name of this new program we're standing it up. It may stay as services. We would even appreciate feedback on that. So it's kind of a good name for now. It includes essentially everything except construction and IT. And we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty here momentarily on the scope. But again, real happy to be working with the Kansas City team that supports BMO. And they've been extremely helpful in helping us carve out a major piece of this new program to support facility management providers such as yourself. So we'll go ahead and move to the next slide and kind of go from there. So there's my picture. And again, I have the distinguished honor of being the program manager for this project. It's not just myself. There's several people behind the scenes, including a dedicated contracting officer, staff, building this program. We're working diligently to get it in place and answer as many questions as you have. And we're getting closer and closer to providing more clarity on our approach. Next slide, please. So you may be asking yourself, what is the Services MAC? Hopefully everybody knows what MAC stands for at this point. It's a multi-agency contract. So similar to BMO, operates exactly the same. GSA is building it, and we're building it with the help of many customers and industry, with the hopes that the federal government will embrace it and use it for their future services-based solutions. It does include a broad range of services. I have a nifty slide here that I'll share, but as promised, there's a large part of it that's dedicated to facilities. Many of the services are currently available through the OASIS program. That's one of the primary reasons we're building this. Some have characterized the Services MAC as the follow-on to OASIS, and I'd say that's mainly true, but we're also wanting to build something a little bit different, a little bit better this time that doesn't limit ourselves to just those tech and engineering type services. Access to highly qualified contractors, I think that goes without saying. I hope to think that pretty much any GSA contract has highly qualified contractors. But I mentioned on here, and I added this, that it includes companies of all sizes from multiple industries. I think we have a little bit of something for everybody listening today. So again, I'll give you a sneak peek on that here momentarily. Better competition at the order level. One of the innovative things that we're considering for the Services MAC is awarding it without consideration of price at the master contract level. So unlike a schedule or BMO or OASIS or some of our legacy GWACs, there would not be any labor hour pricing that you would submit in terms of competing for a spot on this future vehicle. And instead, pricing would matter most at the order level where the actual requirements come to fruition. So don't have the green light on that yet, but if you want to Google section 876 deviation of the NDAA, you can quickly find the language that you're seeking there, but we would be looking to leverage that authority that would allow us to award this contract without pricing. And then finally, pretty much a catch-all that you would see on many of our slide decks, but we want to make it easier for customers and industry to use. Last thing we want to do is build a contract program that nobody wants to use. It's too hard, and industry looks at it and says, you know what, I think I'll recommend different options to my customers. So we're hoping that's not the case, but again, we need your help in making sure that it checks all these boxes. Next slide. And Amy, what do I have, like 15 minutes? I want to kind of keep track of mine.
You have, I think we had you allotted for 20 minutes.
Okay.
So
just let me know if I need to speed up. I don't have very many slides. In terms of the overall structure, I'll get into the scope here in a minute, but we're essentially calling it the Services MAC program, but within the program, there's a family of IDIQ contracts. Each of the bulleted names there you see there represents a separate IDIQ. So you'll see one for each of the small business programs noted there. And then at the very bottom, you see one that's currently being propped up as unrestricted. Many of obviously the larger businesses and the integrators would populate that particular IDIQ, but good news is small businesses would also be able to propose on that one as well. Generally speaking, the scope will be the same across all the IDIQs. We had kicked around the idea of creating a single IDIQ with small business reserves for each of the small business categories that you see listed on the slide. Additional feedback from key stakeholders led us in a different direction, and we landed here, and we hope it ends up being the best of both worlds. But again, if you're, say, for an example, you're a hub zone small business and you happen to be woman-owned, potentially you would qualify for both. Standards would probably be very similar, if not the same. Scope would be the same. We're going to try to make it as seamless as possible in terms of the proposal submission process. So last thing we want to do is, God forbid, you qualify for all of those top 5 categories that you have to submit 5 proposals. That's not our goal. We want you to be able to leverage one proposal as much as possible and try to make it as seamless as possible. Next slide. So you may be asking yourself, this sounds really great, Lee. I'm kind of interested. What's the next steps? And right now I can say we're still doing market research. Market research for any contract of this endeavor is usually pretty lengthy. 1 to 2 years is pretty standard. That's if you want to do it right. We're certainly not wanting to rush this because this is a major undertaking. We've drifted into FY22, as you can see there at the bottom, and I'm calling that loosely the draft RFP phase. So as an example, I don't know if folks listening have joined our Interact page. I know Jocelyn mentioned it in her closing remarks, but we do have a dedicated GSA Interact page. So as an example, in December, we released a draft scope of work, which detailed all the different domains that we're envisioning for this program, all the different work categories, potential next codes, et cetera. It's not too late to look at that and provide your feedback. We are quickly approaching the next stage where we'll be sharing draft evaluation criteria. And we're anticipating releasing that as early as this month. And again, that will be shared via Interact. The goal, if you look at the center of your screen, is the final RFP, and we're looking at probably first quarter, FY23. So that's right around the corner. So we've got our work cut out for us. A lot is going to happen between now and the end of the calendar year in terms of a complete draft RFP, most likely 1 or more industry days, and ultimately a final solicitation. Evaluations will ensue. Obviously, we'll make awards. Ultimate goal is to try to get this program in place and available for ordering before OASIS ends. We definitely don't want any gaps there. Luckily, we have a little bit more of a comfort zone with BMO, but that's still a top priority for GSA, and we want to make sure it's also included in the initial round of awards. One more thing before I move to the next slide. At the very top, you see next regulatory change effective October 1, 2022. What that means, and without going into a lot of great detail because we don't have time, is effective October 1st, the federal government for contracts such as this will be able to identify more than one next code. So that's good because it allows ordering contracting officers to choose the most appropriate next code, and that next code will actually appear in FPDS for the first time in the history of the federal government when placing an order against an MA IDIQ. But it also adds a lot of different dynamics. So we potentially would have more than one size standard on any one of those IDIQs that I mentioned earlier due to the different types of services. So we're sorting that all out, and just wanted to make industry aware of that. And it's something that you need to be aware of and be prepared to maybe read up on and understand before the RFP comes out. Next slide. Okay, as promised, probably looking back, should have moved this to earlier in the slide deck. This is probably a little bit overwhelming, but rest assured there's a key in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. BMO, the Building Maintenance and Operations Vehicle, is I guess you could call that like a baby blue or sky blue. That denotes the scope of Services MAC that will cover that existing legacy vehicle. Furthermore, you see Oasis more in the navy blue. HCAT's our human capital solution. Right on cue, my kids are at the front door, so give me 5 seconds. Okay. I apologize. We're going to keep this presentation authentic, right? Even government employees have lives, right? Okay, so, and then you see the HCAT, the human capital vehicle. We've kind of pushed that towards what we're calling phase 2. Main reason, if there happens to be any HCATS contractors listening, is there's a lot of runway left on that program. In fact, they've got 5 more years of ordering. So there's not like a immediate demand that we included up front. So phase 1, this is what you will most likely see as of today. This is what's planned that would be rolled out in that first quarter FY23 timeframe. All of the different professional services, facility services, and logistics. The orange represents expanded scope, and that's based off market research and feedback from customers, primarily the Oasis user base saying, hey, there were some gaps in your scope, and these are additional needs that we have. We also did some really robust market research from an industry standpoint. We did an RFI. I'm not sure if folks listening responded to that. I know we did have some BMO contractors respond, but we had over 1,000 responses, and that was also really telling and helping us put fences around these dedicated scope areas that we're calling domains. Next slide. This is a really busy slide, so I apologize. But generally speaking, this is, I referenced section C that's available on Interact, and you can download it for yourself. But this is just to give you an idea. I wanted to show you what one of the domains, and again, this is just the facilities domain. There's other domains that were mentioned on that previous slide, but these are the types of services that the government would be seeking through this particular area. And again, this is based on market research from experience from BMO, talking to customers, specifically the Air Force. We spent a great deal of time talking to the Air Force about potentially folding in some of their future base operations support services. So they have been extremely helpful in letting us know which areas are of need and what would be a deal breaker for the Air Force to use this contract. So we pretty much put everything, including the kitchen sink, under most of these domains. Again, it's all services oriented. Like Oasis, like GWAX, like BMO, they are solutions-based contracts. So of course you could have some ancillary support, some materials, equipment, things like that, but primarily it's all services, as you can see from the screen. For those of you who are looking at it that are, jumping to conclusions, this is not all inclusive. This is just a sprinkling of the different types of services that you might see under this domain. Next slide. We've also put together a long list of potential next codes. And this has been one of the biggest challenges for GSA, is identifying any and all next codes that might be applicable to the Services MAC. So we're just looking specifically at facilities for example purposes. We'd still like feedback on this. I think we've done an adequate job of covering that. And again, the main reason is we have to append all these next codes to the master contract. So company ABC wins a Services MAC contract, we would need to make sure that your contract includes all of these, most likely as a separate CLIN, and that would populate your master contract in FPDS. Again, that's important. So it allows contracting officers the ability, when they choose, say, let me look at one, engineering services, or let's do landscape architectural services. That next code needs to be tied to your contract so that when the order is placed, it appears correctly in the system. Next slide. And there's some more next codes. We did not want to be restrictive. So in some cases, you may see some that are, not like hardcore facilities type next codes, but they're still relevant. And again, based on market research, we're still seeing orders that use that code. So definitely take a look at that. And again, if we didn't include it in the slide deck, perhaps we can give you the Interact website in the notes, or however that will be shared later. Next slide. So our current focus, to kind of cut into the chase here, is finalizing our acquisition strategy. A big hurdle that we were able to overcome was finalizing our small business strategy. And again, that's the 6 IDIQ concept. There's other attributes to our strategy that are still being sussed out. I mentioned the 876 deviation that we're most likely going to leverage. We do need to get that finalized. Our period of performance, we're kicking around the idea of having an ordering period of performance that goes beyond 10 years. But all of this requires vetting. There's numerous approvals. We have to get buy-in from our senior procurement executive and others. So we're diligently getting that all tucked in. The second bullet, customer surveys and targeted meetings with future ordering agencies. The survey process is all but done. We surveyed OASIS and BMO DPA holders, Delegation of Procurement Authority holders, and we got probably 200 to 300 responses. That survey is still open for customers and they continue to trickle in, but it's been very telling, and that's helped us put a fence around potential evaluation criteria to make sure that the companies that populate Services MAC have the appropriate capabilities. And then we're having meetings still. We'll continue to have those meetings up until the end. Just as an example, we met with the Air Force EPASS program just yesterday. We're having active conversations with DHS, even our own GSA PBS, in terms of making sure that we build this and it's something that's appropriate for future use. I already mentioned the draft evaluation criteria, and that was kind of something I haven't shared with industry yet. So you guys got the first notification about that, but we do intend to share a sample, what we're calling qualifications matrix, most likely by the end of March. And it may not be for the domain that you're seeking. You may be looking at something outside of tech and engineering, but it'll most likely be tech and engineering. It'll give you an idea of our general strategy and how you'll be evaluated in terms of what types of relevant experience you'll have to have and any other capabilities. And then finally, I just wanted to remind everybody again, it looks like I do have it linked, Amy, but I don't have the address listed there for the Interact post. I would like people to be able to look at that section C and look at the different next codes, and also bookmark that so that they can be on the lookout for future program updates. I think I'm trying to remember if there's another slide after this. We could do the next slide. Okay. I already touched on this on the previous slide, but obtain necessary approvals, initiate deviation request, finalize criteria to qualify for phase 1. That's all of the information that I'm already speaking to that'll be shared via Interact, GSA's blog. We'll continue to socialize those key sections, not only with industry, but with our customers. And finally, make sure that our systems are all in alignment. And to pull this off, like I said, we do have a commitment to make this as seamless as possible. So I can rest assured you that we will continue to have an open dialogue with industry. We will have, a pre-solicitation conference so that folks are not confused. But I really appreciate everybody's time. I think that's the last slide. I think the next one is just questions. Looks like there's some questions in the chat, but I don't know if they're specific to this.
Okay, it looks like we do not have any questions. I did just go ahead and post the Interact link to schedule section C.
It's Amanda.
But we do not have any open questions right now.
All right. Well, Lee, thank you for that wonderful presentation and the future vision of Services MAC. Really appreciate that information. Again, Amanda put the link for Services MAC in the chat box, so make sure that you take a look at that, because as Lee stated, it sounds like there's some great information regarding this new acquisition vehicle that's posted there on a regular basis. So make sure that you check that out. Again, if you have any questions, please be sure to put those in the Q&A and we will get to those.